Welcome to Orashola Stories. Kindly like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. I always say, the higher a man rises without balance, the harder he crashes when gravity finds him. And by this time, gravity had begun to whisper Steve's name. But he wasn't listening. The scandal that should have made him pause, he buried it deep. The girl, that beautiful, broken Nigerian stylish lady, was sent abroad under the guise of a mission scholarship. And just like that, the child, the truth, and the shame were exiled from his pulpit. But the guilt stayed. It crept in through the cracks of his mansion. It whispered during his rehearsed prayers. It screamed when the crowd chanted, "Daddy." He would walk into church now like royalty, clothed in robes sewn in Italy, holding a Bible he no longer read, preaching sermons he no longer lived. But outwardly, oh, he glowed. Miracles increased. The crowd doubled. So did the lies. One night, Steve stood before his mirror. And for the first time in years, he didn't recognize the man staring back. He wasn't praying anymore. He was performing. He wasn't leading anymore. He was acting. You see, there comes a point in every great deception where the deceiver begins to believe his own lie. And that's where Steve was. He wasn't just deceiving the people. He had started deceiving himself. His calendar was full. Speaking in South Africa, private jets to Dubai, dinners with governors, lunches with oil moguls. And then, in the corner of his day, maybe, a rushed 5-minute prayer, just to feel less empty. But heaven was silent now. And even worse, Steve didn't miss it. Things began to spiral when Pastor Daniel, the one friend who knew the old Steve, stopped calling. Stopped showing up. He could no longer pretend not to see the rot. Steve told himself, they're jealous. He believed the lie because it hurt less than the truth. And the truth was this. He had become what he once preached against. A monument of flesh wrapped in spiritual titles. Meanwhile, Sarah, the passionate volunteer from chapter 2, had begun noticing too much. She had heard whispers, saw too many contradictions. She tried to speak to leadership. They shut her down, told her to focus on her department. So she quietly stepped away. But not before writing an anonymous letter. A letter that would later surface, like a matchstick dropped in a dry forest. Behind closed doors, Steve had started working with men who didn't fear God, but knew how to control crowds. They taught him manipulation disguised as prophecy, how to extract emotions and offerings in one sweep. They trained him to fake fainting spells, to shake while praying, to call names from church records. And Steve, he mastered it. He became the show. Soon, interviews followed. TV stations called him Africa's fire prophet. He smiled on the covers. But inside, he couldn't sleep. Nightmares returned. This time, the dream was different. He was back in that open field as a boy. But this time, the crowd turned on him. They screamed, not in worship, but in anger. Stones in hand, Bibles burning. He woke up, gasping. But instead of repenting, he fasted for 3 days. Not to reconnect with God, but to sanitize the spiritual air. His words, not mine. Then came the event that cracked the surface. A child, a 7-year-old boy. He walked up during altar call. And in front of thousands, he said, "Pastor, God said to tell you to stop lying." The crowd laughed awkwardly. Steve chuckled and said, "Children will be children." But he was shaken, because that boy, that Nigerian teenage boy, looked just like he did at that age. Innocent, fearless, unbought. He went home that night and locked himself in his prayer room. Tried to speak in tongues. Nothing came. Tried to cry. Tears wouldn't fall. He stared at his wall full of awards and thought, what if I'm the devil's most decorated puppet? But he brushed it off. Went to sleep. And told his media team to delete the video of the boy. Which they did, but someone had already posted it. And it was going viral. The elders called for a private meeting. Some of them had begun to fear what Steve was becoming. But he silenced them, told them, this ministry is bigger than one child's joke. One elder, a soft-spoken man named Elder Philip, rose and said, "Sir, a man who cannot be corrected is a man close to destruction." Steve fired him the next day. No ceremony, no thanks, just silence. The girl Steve had sent abroad. She had returned, quietly, now with a child. She didn't want money, she didn't want revenge, she just wanted closure, a name for her son. Truth, peace. She waited after service one day, tried to speak with him, but he walked past, pretended not to see her. But he did, and that night, he cried, first real tears in years. He cried because he realized he had lost everything that once made him real, and he couldn't get it back. And yet, Sunday still came, the crowd still shouted, miracles still happened, money still flowed, but behind the robe, behind the title, behind the fame, was a man unraveling, slowly, quietly, dangerously. And while the world saw Pastor Steve, he no longer saw himself.